The ballroom at the Hartwell estate smelled like fresh lilies and old money, which was my brother's favorite combination. He had rented the entire venue for his engagement party. 300 guests, a live jazz quartet, and a chocolate fountain that probably cost more than my first car. I was standing near the back, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, when my sister-in-law-to-be clinked her ring against her champagne flute and said, loudly enough for the nearest 40 people to hear, "We really should have put the seating chart together without asking Wren. She has no eye for this kind of thing." My brother laughed. He always laughed when she said things like that, and then he turned to me and said, "Hey, do me a favor and go check if the caterers need anything." Like I was staff. I handed my untouched glass to the nearest waiter and slipped my phone out of my clutch. One new email. Subject line: wire transfer confirmed. $4.7 million acquisition complete. The building at 114 Carver Street, Nashville, Tennessee, the one my brother's restaurant group had been leasing their flagship location from for the past 6 years, now had a new landlord. Me. I looked up at him across the room, laughing with his friends, adjusting the cufflinks I knew our parents had bought him, in the suit they had paid for, at the party they had funded. He had no idea that the ground beneath everything he'd built had just shifted. I smiled at no one in particular and walked toward the caterers. "My name is Wren. I'm 31. And before I tell you what happened 3 weeks later when my brother showed up at my office, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been the one they sent to check on the caterers? I want to hear your story." I grew up in a house in Franklin, Tennessee, where the rules were unspoken but absolute. My brother Cooper was 2 years older, and he was, by every metric my parents measured, the one who mattered. Not because he was smarter, not because he was kinder, but because he was loud and handsome, and he wanted things in a way that made people feel chosen when he asked them for help. I was quiet. I noticed things. Those were not considered assets in our household. When Cooper was 16, my father took him to look at a piece of land he was thinking about developing. It was a Saturday. I asked if I could come. My father looked at me the way you look at a dog that's asked to ride shotgun. He said, "You'd be bored, sweetheart." He never asked what I might want to learn. When Cooper graduated high school, my parents threw him a party at the country club and gave him a Jeep with a bow on it. When I graduated 2 years later, a semester early, with honors, my mother made my favorite dinner and handed me an envelope with $200 in it. She said, "We know you'll figure it out." She said it like it was a compliment. I figured it out. That part they got right, but they had no idea what figuring it out actually looked like. Cooper went into restaurant hospitality. He had the personality for it, the big handshake, the booming voice, the ability to make every person at a table feel like the most important person in the room. My parents invested $300,000 into his first restaurant when he was 26. They called it a loan, but I never saw a repayment schedule. I looked once. The paperwork didn't have one. I got a different kind of start. I put myself through a real estate investment program at Vanderbilt with money I had saved working 2 jobs through college. I spent 3 years analyzing commercial real estate data for a property management firm in Nashville, learning every zip code, every rent cycle, every undervalued pocket of the city. Then I started buying. Nothing flashy, a duplex here, a small mixed-use building there. I drove a Honda Civic with 80,000 miles on it and wore clothes from consignment shops and ate lunch at my desk 5 days a week. While Cooper was being photographed for Nashville Lifestyles magazine and my parents were framing the article for the living room, I was quietly assembling a portfolio that would have made their accountant's jaw drop. They thought I was doing fine. They thought I was renting an apartment somewhere, maybe doing property management for someone else's buildings. When the conversation at family dinners turned to money, my father would clap Cooper on the shoulder and say, "This one's going to take care of us someday," and everyone would laugh, and I would ask if anyone wanted more bread. I didn't correct them. I didn't perform. I watched. At 29, I incorporated my holding company. I named it Ironbark Capital. I liked the image, a tree that looks plain from the outside but is almost impossible to break. Within 18 months, Ironbark Capital had acquired 11 commercial properties across Middle Tennessee. I had 2 full-time employees, a lawyer I trusted completely, and a net worth that would have rearranged the entire seating chart at every family dinner we'd ever had. Nobody knew. I kept it that way deliberately, not out of shame, out of strategy. I had watched Cooper operate for years. I knew that the moment my parents understood what I had built, they would want something from it. They would reframe it as a family asset. They would talk about Cooper needing a good landlord, about how it would be so wonderful if we could all work together, and it would be the $300,000 loan with no repayment schedule all over again, except this time it would be my life's work on the table. So I stayed invisible. I was very good at it by then. The engagement party happened in March. 3 months before that, I had quietly identified 114 Carver Street as an acquisition target. Cooper's flagship location, the one that had made him a name in Nashville's food scene, was leasing from an aging owner who was ready to exit. The lease rate was below market. The building was in excellent shape. And Cooper, as I happened to know from a conversation I overheard at Thanksgiving, had been trying to negotiate a purchase for 2 years and kept getting stonewalled. I made an offer in January, all cash, clean close, 30-day escrow. The owner said yes immediately. I didn't tell anyone, I just waited. The confirmation email arrived at 8:47 p.m. on a Saturday in the middle of my brother's engagement party, while his fiancée was explaining to 40 people that I had no eye for seating charts. I went to check on the caterers. They were fine. The drive home from the estate that night took 20 minutes. I had lived in the same 2-bedroom condo in East Nashville for 4 years. Nothing about it announced what I was worth. The building was a 1960s brick mid-rise, clean, well-managed, no doorman. I had chosen it because I wanted to live where I could think, not where I could perform. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window. My phone had 6 missed calls from my mother before midnight, which was unusual. I listened to the first voicemail. She was not calling about the engagement party. She was calling because my father had received a letter. I knew what letter. I had authorized it 2 days earlier, a standard notice from Ironbark Capital to all tenants at newly acquired properties, introducing the new ownership and outlining the transition process. Standard language. Professional. Routine. For anyone who wasn't my father's son leasing the building they thought they would eventually buy. I didn't call back that night. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat in the quiet of my apartment and let myself feel the weight of what was coming. Not with dread, more like the feeling you get at the top of a very tall staircase when you've decided to walk down instead of run. Controlled. Deliberate. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a woman named Patricia who had been with me since the Ironbark days and who was entirely unimpressed by drama of any kind. Cooper's team is going to reach out, I told her. They already have, she said. Twice. I told them to submit anything in writing. Good. Are you ready for the family piece of this? I looked out the window. A kid on a bike was weaving between parked cars down on the street, easy, unbothered. I've been ready for a while, I said. My mother called again at 9. This time I picked up. Wren. Her voice had that particular quality it got when she was trying to stay calm over something that was upsetting her, tight at the edges. Cooper says his restaurant got a letter from some company, Ironbark Capital. Do you know anything about that? Yes, I said. Silence. What do you mean, yes? I mean, yes, I know about it. Ironbark Capital is my company, Mom. I own the building. There was a long pause, the kind that has texture to it. You. She stopped. Cooper's building? He leases space in it, yes. Wren. Her voice shifted. Softer now, which was actually more unsettling. Cooper has been trying to buy that building for 2 years. You knew that. I did. So why would you, how did you even, she stopped again. Then, does your father know about this company of yours? I noticed the phrase, company of yours, like it was a lemonade stand, like it was something small and personal that had wandered into adult territory uninvited. No, I said. I've been building it quietly for about 4 years. Another silence. Then she said very carefully, "We're going to need to talk about this as a family." I told her I agreed. I told her I would be in my office Wednesday at 2 o'clock and they were welcome to come. My brother called 11 minutes after I hung up with my mother. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, then again. Then his fiancée called from a number I didn't have saved, which told me he was sitting right next to her using her phone, which told me he was more rattled than he wanted to appear. I texted him the office address and told him Wednesday at 2. He texted back in about 4 seconds, "What office?" I didn't respond. I had leased the Ironbark Capital office space 18 months earlier, a full floor in a building on 5th Avenue North in downtown Nashville, 2 blocks from the Gulch, floor-to-ceiling windows, a conference room with a view of the Cumberland River. I had chosen it not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I spent 10 to 12 hours a day there, and I believe that the quality of your environment shapes the quality of your thinking. My assistant, a sharp 24-year-old named Andy, met me at the elevator Wednesday morning with a coffee and a look that said she had fielded several calls already. "Your brother called the main line twice this morning," she said. "I told him the meeting was confirmed for 2. Good. Your mother also called. She asked if there was parking." I almost smiled. "There's a garage on the corner." At 1:55, I watched on the lobby security feed as my family walked in. My father first. He always walked first, in his good blazer, the one he wore when he wanted to project authority. My mother beside him, clutching her purse in both hands. Cooper behind them, jaw set, wearing the expression he got when he was about to negotiate. His fiancée, Amber, was with him. She was scrolling through her phone. They stopped at the reception desk. I heard my father say, with the slight over-enunciation he used with service staff, "We're here to see Wren. She works here." Andy looked up. "Ms. Wren is expecting you. Right this way, please." I watched my father's face change as they crossed the floor. He was a developer. He understood square footage and build-out costs and what a lease in this part of Nashville ran per square foot. The math was happening behind his eyes, and the answer it was producing did not match the daughter he thought he knew. Cooper had stopped next to the window and was looking at the river. Andy opened the conference room door. I was sitting at the head of the table, not in the rolling chair with the broken wheel they probably imagined. In a chair that cost more than the Jeep they had given my brother the summer I got an envelope with $200 in it. I was wearing a blazer I'd bought myself, tailored to fit, and I had my hands flat on the table because I wanted them to see that they were steady. "Sit down," I said. My mother blinked. My father opened his mouth and then closed it. Cooper looked at Amber. Amber put her phone in her purse. They sat down. My father recovered first. He always did. "Wren." He used the voice he used when he was renegotiating a contract. Firm, reasonable, the voice of a man who expected to be listened to. "I don't know what kind of stunt this is, but Cooper has a business to run. His lease is up for renewal in 8 months. Whatever game you're playing." "I'm not playing anything," I said. I slid a folder across the table. It stopped in front of him. "That's a summary of Ironbark Capital's current portfolio," I said. 14 commercial properties, total assessed value just under $60 million. Cooper's location is one of them. My father opened the folder slowly. I watched his eyes move across the first page. My mother said quietly, "Wren, where did this money come from?" "I earned it," I said, "over 8 years. I started with a duplex I bought for $190,000 using money I saved working 2 jobs in college. I reinvested every dollar of profit. I took no outside investment, no loans from family. I let that land, All of it is documented. Cooper leaned forward. You should have told us. If you were building something like this, we could have. What? I asked. I kept my voice level. What would you have done? He stopped. You would have asked me to give you a better lease rate, I said. Dad would have suggested I look at some of his development projects as investment opportunities. Mom would have started talking about how wonderful it would be if we could all build something together as a family. I paused. I've watched how this family handles money for a long time. I needed to build this somewhere you couldn't reach it. The room was very quiet. My father set the folder down. That's a hell of a thing to say to us. It's an honest thing, I said. I pulled up a second document on the screen at the end of the room. The first page showed a financial history, my parents' business accounts, specifically an education trust that my grandmother had established for me in 1997 when I was 4 years old. The trust had been funded at $80,000. It was structured to grow and disperse for college expenses starting when I turned 18. I turned 18 in 2010. The trust was liquidated in 2008, I said. 2 years before I was supposed to use it. I didn't know until 2 years ago when I was reviewing some old estate documents after Grandma passed. My mother's face did something complicated. The withdrawal was authorized with my signature, I said. I was 15. I did not sign that document. Cooper was very still. $80,000, I said. Used to cover operational losses in Dad's development company during the crash. I found the transfer records. I clicked to the next slide. I'm not going to file anything. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I looked at my father. But I need you to understand that I have known for 2 years that my future was taken without my knowledge to cover a shortfall I had nothing to do with. And nobody told me. Not when it happened. Not ever. My father's face had gone the color of old newspaper. He started to say something about the financial crisis, about impossible choices, about how he always intended to replace it. I let him talk for a moment. Then I said gently, I know. I did know. I had sat with it for 2 years. I understood the desperation of 2008. I didn't need an apology that would cost him nothing. What I needed was to say it out loud, in a room where I was not the one standing near the back, and to have them hear it. Here's what I want, I said. I slid one more document across the table. This one was simple. 1 page. Cooper's lease. I'm offering a 5-year renewal at current market rate, which is actually lower than what he'll find anywhere else on Carver Street right now because I'm not trying to squeeze him out. I looked at my brother. You're good at what you do. I want your business to succeed. But going forward, it succeeds because you built it, not because someone in the family handed you an advantage. Cooper looked down at the paper. The rate is fair, Patricia said from the corner. Neither of my parents had noticed her sitting there. My father looked at her, then back at me. That's it? That's it, I said. Sign the lease. We move forward like the adults we all are. No favors, no resentments. Clean. Amber spoke for the first time. What about the ownership situation, if you own the building he leases? It's a business relationship, I said, same as it would be with any other landlord. Except this landlord is not going to raise his rent arbitrarily or sell the building out from under him. I looked at Cooper. I bought it partly because I knew he'd been trying to and getting nowhere. You can be angry about that if you want. Or you can recognize that you now have a stable home for your restaurant for at least the next 5 years. My brother was quiet for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not the negotiating expression, something different. Older. Why didn't you just tell us? He said. Not accusatory, genuinely asking. I thought about how to answer that. I thought about every dinner where my father clapped him on the shoulder and talked about legacy. I thought about the envelope with $200 in it. I thought about the word sweetheart and what it meant to be handed something diminishing by someone who thought they were being kind. Because I needed to know I could do it without your permission, I said. He nodded slowly, like that actually made sense to him. My father signed the lease summary acknowledging the terms. Cooper signed the renewal. Patricia would handle the formal documentation. They left 20 minutes later. My mother stopped at the door and turned back. She looked at me for a moment. Not the complicated look. Something plainer than that. "I didn't know about the trust," she said. "Not until just now." I believed her. I had believed her for a while, actually. Some betrayals are singular. I had learned to separate them carefully. "Okay," I said. She nodded and walked out. Andy brought me a coffee after they left. She didn't say anything, which was one of the things I valued most about her. I stood at the window for a while and looked at the river. I thought about the girl who had worked the closing shift at a coffee shop in college so she could save $400 a month. I thought about the spreadsheet I had built on a free trial of Excel on a laptop with a cracked hinge, tracking every dollar in and out, running projections that I couldn't tell anyone about because there was no one in my life at the time who would have believed they were real. I thought about my grandmother, who used to sit with me on her back porch and ask me what I was thinking about, who was the only person in the family who ever asked, who had set aside $80,000 because she believed I would need a foundation, and who had no idea that the foundation had been borrowed without my knowledge before I ever got to stand on it. The Ironbark Foundation launched 4 months later. I had been planning it for a year. It was a real estate financial literacy program, free, open to women between 18 and 25 who were first-generation college students or recent graduates without family financial networks to learn from. We covered everything: how to read a lease, how to evaluate an investment property, how escrow worked, what an LLC was and how to form one, how to build credit strategically, how to think about money not as something you received but as something you constructed. We named the first scholarship after my grandmother. Cooper came to the launch event. He came alone, without Amber, which I noticed. He stood at the back of the room during the opening remarks, and afterward, he found me near the coffee station. "This is good," he said. He meant it. Cooper had a lot of faults, but he knew good work when he saw it. "Thank you," I said. "I told Mom and Dad about it." He paused. "Dad said he always knew you were smart." I smiled. "Sure he did." Cooper laughed, a real laugh, the kind from when we were kids. "Yeah, okay, fair." We stood there for a moment in the comfortable, awkward silence of two people renegotiating the terms of a relationship that had never been fair and might still become something worth keeping. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad you have the building." I looked at him. "Seriously," he said, "you're a better landlord than the last guy." That was probably the most honest thing my brother had ever said to me. People ask me sometimes what the point was. Why not just walk away from all of it? The family, the history, the conference room confrontation, and build the life from a safe distance. And I understand the question. Clean breaks have a certain appeal, but I didn't want to disappear. I had already spent 20 years being invisible in that family, and I knew exactly what it cost. What I wanted was to be seen accurately by people who had chosen not to see me in a room I had furnished myself. I wanted them to know that the quiet one was building something the whole time. If you are building in the dark right now, in a job that doesn't see you, in a family that talks over you, in a room where they hand you the purse instead of putting you in the frame, keep going. The view from the top of what you build is yours and yours alone. They'll see it when they're standing in your conference room trying to figure out when exactly you became the landlord. I keep thinking about the moment my father opened that folder. The way his eyes moved across the first page, not with anger, not yet, but with the slow recalibration of a man who had built an entire story about who I was and was now watching it come apart line by line. He understood square footage and asset value. He knew exactly what he was looking at. And for the first time in my life, he was looking at me and actually seeing me. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because of choices I made over 8 years that nobody knew about and nobody asked about. choices that required me to be honest with myself in a way my family never was with me. Honest about what I had, what I didn't have, and what I was going to do about it. I couldn't afford to lie to myself. I had no safety net. There was no $300,000 waiting if I got it wrong. So I had to get it right. And getting it right meant being clear-eyed about reality even when reality was uncomfortable. That's the thing about growing up the invisible one. People assume it breaks you. Sometimes it does. But if you're paying attention, it also teaches you something that the golden child never learns: how to observe without being observed, how to study a system from the outside until you understand it well enough to build a better one. I spent years watching how my family made decisions, how money moved, how approval was given and withheld. I was taking notes the whole time, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. That quiet, careful attention was the first real asset I ever owned. And then there was the work itself. Not the romantic version of it, not the montage of late nights and breakthrough moments. The actual thing, which was mostly unglamorous and lonely and full of doubt. The duplex I almost didn't buy because I was afraid. The deal that fell through 2 weeks before closing and cost me 6 months of positioning. The nights I ran the numbers for the fifth time because I needed to be sure, and then ran them again anyway. Persistence without someone cheering for you is a different kind of muscle. It doesn't get built at family dinners where your father is clapping someone else on the shoulder. It gets built in the silence, in the deciding to keep going when there is no external reason to. What I did with the building, offering Cooper a fair lease, not a punishing one, that mattered to me more than any of it. I could have raised his rent to market ceiling and watched him scramble. I had every legal right to. But that's not what I was building toward. I wanted the record set straight, not the other person destroyed. There's a version of this story where I use what I have to level everything around me, and I understand why people sometimes do that. But I think you have to decide what kind of person you want to be when you finally get to the position where you could. I wanted to be someone my grandmother would have recognized. Someone who understood that real strength is in what you choose not to do with it. The foundation is what I'm most proud of. Not the portfolio, not the conference room, not the expression on my father's face. The foundation, named after her, teaching young women how to read a lease and form an LLC and think about money as something they build rather than something they receive. That's the part that will still matter when everything else is changed hands again. What I built in the dark is real. What it cost to build it taught me who I am, and the view from here is something no one can step me out of the frame to take away.